For generations, a simple set of metal keys was the heaviest thing a young person could hold. It was an object of alchemy. The moment those jagged edges slipped into your palm, the world fundamentally changed its shape. The horizon was no longer a painted backdrop, it was a destination. Turning 16 and gripping a steering wheel wasn't just a legal milestone, it was the ultimate psychological threshold of autonomy. It was the great, romanticized escape from the watchful eyes of parents, from the claustrophobia of childhood bedrooms, from the stifling geography of your hometown. A car was never just glass, rubber, and steel. It was the American dream distilled into a machine. It meant control. It meant you had arrived. But today, if you look closely at the landscape of youth, a profound silence has settled over that once revered rite of passage. The driveways are empty. The urgency to secure that plastic license has evaporated. The keys have lost their magic. If you are a part of Gen Z, you already know the accusations. You have heard the chorus of older voices, the articles, the dinner table lectures. They call you the anxious generation. They say you are suffering from a collective Peter Pan syndrome, terrified of growing up, addicted to screens, and stripped of the natural human drive for independence. They look at your reluctance to buy a car, to memorize the rules of the road, to take on the open highway, and they diagnose it as a moral failing, a lack of ambition. But what they don't understand, what they are perhaps too comfortable to admit, is that your apathy is not a symptom of laziness. It is a highly evolved, deeply logical psychological adaptation to a world that has broken its promises. You are not afraid of the road. You simply realize that the road no longer leads anywhere you can afford to go. To understand the psychology of the carless generation, we have to examine the concept of the illusion of control. For a baby boomer or a Gen Xer, the car was the ultimate locus of control. You put your foot on the pedal and the machine moved. You turned the wheel and your destiny shifted. The economy was stable enough and the trajectory of life was predictable enough that this physical control perfectly mirrored their psychological reality. If you worked hard, you moved forward. But Gen Z has inherited a deeply chaotic macro environment. You have come to age in a relentless cascade of historical anomalies, global recessions, a suffocating housing market, a volatile job landscape, and the looming existential shadow of climate change. You have been forced to realize very early on that the steering wheel is a prop. You can grip it as tightly as you want, but you cannot steer your way out of systemic economic collapse. You cannot drive away from the fact that a starter home costs 10 times what it did when your parents were your age. The psychological comfort of the open road is a phantom limb, a sensation of freedom that no longer corresponds to the body of reality. Instead of a vessel of freedom, the car has slowly morphed into something deeply sinister, an anchor. Psychologists often talk about microtraumas, the small, repetitive, seemingly invisible injuries that slowly erode our baseline of safety. For a young person today, the modern economy is a landscape of microtraumas. Every subscription, every hidden fee, every rent hike is a slow draining of resources. In this environment of scarcity, a car is not a ticket to liberation, it is a massive, depreciating liability. It is car payments, insurance premiums, fluctuating gas prices, sudden maintenance failures, and parking fees. It is a 3-ton debt machine that sits idle for 90% of its life. Previous generations were sold a simple equation. You buy a car so you can go to work, and you go to work so you can afford your life. But for you, the math has become a dystopian paradox. You are being asked to buy a car you cannot afford, to commute to a job that barely pays your rent just so you can maintain the car you need to get to the job. You have recognized this absurd circular trap. By refusing to buy into car culture, you are not refusing independence. You are refusing servitude. You are actively rejecting a system of indentured mobility. But there's a deeper, more melancholic layer to this shift, one that goes beyond economics. It has to do with the very nature of physical space and how we connect with others. Sociologists often mourn the death of the third place, those physical locations outside of home and work where people could gather, linger, and exist without spending money. The diners, the public parks, the local malls. For decades, the car was the necessary bridge to these third places. You drove to find connection. You drove to find your people. Today, that physical landscape has become fundamentally hostile. The malls are decaying husks. The cafes demand a $7 purchase for the right to sit. Public spaces are increasingly surveilled, commercialized, or dismantled entirely. If you get in a car today, where exactly are you supposed to go? The physical world has become an exclusive VIP lounge that charges a premium just for breathing its air. Simultaneously, the nature of connection has undergone a total digital migration. The portal to your friends, your communities, and your subcultures is no longer parked in the driveway. It is resting in the palm of your hand. When the physical world became too expensive to navigate and the digital world became too loud to endure, human psychology executes a remarkable unseen pivot. Faced with a gridlocked reality, you didn't stop moving, you simply stopped moving horizontally. Instead, you began a quiet, profound journey downward into the architecture of the self. We can call this the Great Inward Migration. Previous generations measured their progress by how far they could travel away from their origins. They conquered highways, amassed possessions, and measured their freedom by the square footage of their lawns and the horsepower in their engines. But when you were born into a world where the land is already conquered, bought, and priced entirely out of your reach, geographical expansion is no longer a viable metric for growth. So you turned your gaze inward. If you could not control the economy, if you could not afford the car, you would master the only territory left that truly belonged to you: your own mind, your own boundaries, and your own healing. To the outside observer, to the critics who measure success by tire tracks and exhaust fumes, they see you standing in your room, opting out of the traditional rat race, choosing not to finance a vehicle, and they label it apathy. But what they cannot see is the sheer, exhausting velocity of your internal movement. You were doing the heavy, unseen labor of untangling generational trauma. You were setting psychological boundaries that your parents never had the language to construct. You were dismantling the deeply ingrained, toxic belief that your worth is tied to your productivity and your purchasing power. You were building an invisible wall, not to keep the world out, but to protect the fragile, quiet peace you were cultivating within. Rejecting the car is not a rejection of adulthood. It is a profound rejection of the specific, consumer-driven brand of adulthood that was designed to keep you exhausted and indebted. But this inward migration, as necessary and as brave as it is, carries its own shadow. There's a danger in total stillness. We are, at our biological core, nomadic creatures. The human nervous system is wired to process the world through forward momentum. When you walk, when your eyes scan a shifting horizon, your brain naturally regulates its anxiety. The physical act of moving forward literally tells your amygdala that you are surviving, that you are progressing, that you are capable of escaping danger. When you confine your life to a screen and a 5-mile radius, when your experience of speed is the manic, infinite scroll of a timeline, the nervous system becomes trapped in a state of suspended animation. This is why the anxiety of your generation often feels paralyzing. Your mind is processing 1,000 crises a minute, but your physical body is entirely stationary. The energy of panic has nowhere to go. It pools in your chest, in your jaw, in the quiet hours of the night when the screens finally go dark. This is the psychological paradox you must solve. You have rightfully identified that the old vehicle of freedom, the car, the debt, the relentless hustle, is a trap. But you must also recognize that complete immobility is a slow poison. Healing, then, requires a radical redefinition of what it means to travel. If independence is no longer about turning a key in an ignition, what is it? It is time to uncouple the concept of freedom from the machinery of capitalism.
Freedom is no longer about the ability to run away. It is about cultivating the safety and the stability to stay. It is the profound autonomy of waking up and knowing that your time belongs to you, not to a loan officer. It is the peace of mind that comes from financial minimalism. By stripping away the heavy, rusting expectations of the past, you are actually making yourself incredibly light. You are becoming agile in a world that demands adaptation. But you must find a way to move your physical body through the world again on your own terms. You must reclaim the horizon, not as a consumer, but as a human being. This means finding the poetry in the local. It means viewing the walk to the neighborhood grocery store not as a chore, but as a necessary grounding ritual. It means finding the quiet rebellion in public transportation, sitting on a train or a bus, existing in a shared space with strangers, reading a book